G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and importantly a fantastic weekend, and I hope that all your computers didn't shut down, and if they did, maybe I hope that you got some time off from work from your boss. But again, today, as usual, we have then a lot to talk about. Of course, we're going to look at the maps. We're going to look at where things are updating and where two different maps are then showing the same amount of movement to confirm where movement is or maybe is not. We need to look at what Zelensky and former President Donald Trump have then posted online after their talk together as well. And we need to talk about potential peace negotiations and how the messaging Ukraine is putting out is significantly different from now a few months ago. And then we'll talk about that. And we need to link this as well with the drone we saw flying to Tel Aviv yesterday. And then we'll look at what Zelensky has said in BBC as well about F-16s and a little bit of everything. Now, firstly, it's just something I was thinking about is the intelligence operations failure that has occurred. And I don't think at the time I spoke on this enough. So we saw that a Russian helicopter pilot had defected to Ukraine. He had then his colleagues killed. He was paid a large sum of money. And then he was then killed in Spain, presumably by then some level of hired guns or a Russian group here. Spanish intelligence service accused a Kremlin of orchestrating the murder of Maxim Kuzminov, who got then, of course, his colleagues killed, then paid a large sum of money, helicopter and some parts, and then was killed. Now, something we probably didn't speak about in this enough was the failure of the intelligence agencies around the world to keep then Maxim alive will have had such a huge impact on future operations like this. Now, I know this is a while back, but I was just thinking more of it, and I don't think I spoke about it enough. So, of course, in the last few weeks, what we have seen is rumors, well, at least Russia was saying that Ukrainian intelligence services mixed with Western intelligence services tried to recruit a Russia supersonic bomber, a Tu-22 pilot, to then fly one of those aircraft in and land. And that what they were reporting is that they actually worked in a double operation and figured out where elements of air defense and other critical bits and pieces were to use that information back. Now, whether this is truthful or not, we never truly know with Intel Ops, but the failure to keep that bloke alive definitely will have impacted operations like this then in the future. Now, speaking of then aircraft in the air, we need to talk about the F-16s at the moment, the Phantom F-16s that we're not sure where they are. We were told months ago that it would be weeks, and we still question the problems there. And of course, the overall effectiveness of these aircraft. And this was with a BBC interview. So let's refer to this interview in the future in this video too. Ukraine had hoped its military efforts would be boosted by the arrival of F-16 planes promised by its allies this summer. Zelensky said it's been 18 months and the planes have not reached us. He emphasised that the new fighters were essential to help Ukrainians push back the Russians' aerial dominance and unblock the skies. With the war continuing for more than 2 years without an end in sight, questions are being raised as to whether there could be a negotiated solution. So this is foreshadowing into a negotiated solution we are going to talk about in a bit. But the F-16s have not arrived. They've been expecting them. It's been 18 months. This is still a very, very short pipeline to take either pilots trained on Soviet-era aircraft or not trained on fighter aircraft to have them then enter the most challenging air environment that has ever existed for fighter aircraft. And initially, like we've spoken about it before, at least for an amount of time, we presume that these aircraft are not going to be operating on the front line. They're going to be operating in more of an air defense position to get experience, gain experience not only of the air crew, but the ground crew as well, before then more dangerous operations. But there's also been questions around how many will actually be going and how many pilots have actually been trained and how many aircraft can actually be on the ground. The whole thing is up in the air of, one, how much, if any, effect will it actually have overall, not short term, not for the first few weeks, because we may see that, but for 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, how much effect will it actually have, the cost versus reward of that platform. And I've spoken many times, things like this and Abrams is not what I'd be going for. I'd be going for the same cost every soldier with a good pair of boots, every soldier with a good night vision, every position down the front line has thermals, and that's developed off what I've spoken to soldiers on the front and what they say is affecting them, because 20 F-16s is not going to gain air dominance. It's not going to happen. 50 may not even be that. Even 100 may not be that. And this is working off numbers Ukraine and US have said themselves that it's going to need a lot more than that, and that we know that amount, at least to the 100, 200, isn't really workable in the pipeline at the moment. And I question the dollar for dollar, the effect that could have been when we actually, if it was supplied to frontline elements. But we need to talk about that. Rumours of negotiated solutions. Now, does anyone else get the feeling that Ukraine may be setting the stage for some serious peace settlements or peace conferences? Because it's just some of the messaging coming out that's so different from only a few months ago, very recently. And I do ask, maybe this is in preparation for if Trump gets into power, then that is, I guess, the plan B, and then do that if Trump says this needs to end. It's at least working out how that will then look. So last week, we then saw what Zelensky had said, that a Russian delegation should be then at the next peace conference. Last month, Switzerland hosted a Ukraine peace summit, but Russia was not invited, therefore China did not attend. Mr. Zelensky has since said that Russia should attend a second peace summit penned in November. That said, Russia has basically said that they will not attend if it's not taking into the realistic nature of what is happening on the front line. Now again, I do ask exactly what is going to be the end of this peace summit. If it happens in November, is it to, at the end of it, the guns fall silent, or is it on certain points of Zelensky's peace plan? Because this is what it is looking like, that it's not going to be guns fall silent, but it's going to be on the 3 points of the peace formula of nuclear, food security, and release of POWs and return of children. What I think every country can get on board with specifically those. It was very interesting to look at what Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, has said then about nuclear and food security, about not energy, because of then the problem with then the taking out of Nord Stream, and food security. Of course, Nord Stream has had then an effect on that. But if it's on these 3 points, these 3 points alone won't be a peace summit of to have the guns fall silent. So let's continue on then this BBC article. He told the BBC that the whole world will need to put pressure on Russia in order to persuade it to sit down and consider ending the war. It does not mean that all territories are won back by force. I think the power of diplomacy can help, adding that a weaker Russia on the battlefield would put Ukraine in a stronger position on the negotiating table. By putting pressure on Russia, I think it's possible to agree to a diplomatic settlement. Zelensky has been Ukraine's leader since 2019 throughout Russia's full-scale invasion. While elections were due this year, Ukraine's constitution rules out a ballot during the time of martial law, but he has said that he will not step down until the war is over. That's when then elections may then take place. Now, let's look further on of what was said in this interview as well. I believe that if we're united and follow, for example, the format of the peace summit, we can end the hot stage of the war. We can try to do it by the end of this year. We're well over halfway through the year, and we look at towards the end of the year, we're looking at US elections. That's what I'm saying. Is this a bit of a plan B? The plan will be ready. If it leads to the end of the hot stage of the war, it will be very right and powerful. It also depends on the desire that no one interfere with their initiatives to end the war. This, I think, is looking towards primarily Viktor Orban. But we mix in with this, and then this one here about the negotiating table, diplomacy. It does need to take into account the realistic nature of what is happening on the front. And I think it is very important to note at this point in time, Russia has more bargaining chips than Ukraine. Of course, Russia occupies a significant portion of Ukrainian land and, of course, has the initiative with the front line moving in Russia's favour every day. Yes, the West has sanctions, which these sanctions were nowhere near as effective as thought. The thing is with these sanctions, once you pile on every single sanction, what else is there then to sanction? So that creates an issue as well. But I think another bargaining chip that Russia has is the overall geopolitical aspect. That due to the sanctions, its formed new relationships or more friendly relationships with countries that could be or are unfriendly to the West or challenge the West's power. China, mainly, Iran, I guess the global South. And like it or not, and this is unpopular to say, but Europe is safer with a working relationship with Russia. This doesn't mean sitting down by the campfire singing Kumbaya and Putin hand shandies, but the longer this war goes on, the more replacement of business that Russia will find away from Western markets. And then other nations will grow more powerful from this due to cheaper energy and as well, potentially a lot of technological flow as well. Now, many will point to the idea of collapsing Russia internally, and this too is of international concern when you're speaking about a major nuclear power. Firstly, who would replace Putin? And many have said, and I agree, that if you were to topple Putin, likely you would get someone more extreme. Now, people will point to then examples of this, but when they point to the collapse of the Soviet Union, in my belief personally, and I think this is shared with a lot of people in my sort of business, we luckily got away with it without a huge either internal civil war or then a hot war rising from this as well. And then, of course, we didn't interfere in the Bolshevik Revolution due to our own losses from the First World War. But the unpredictability of the collapse of a major nuclear power is a worldwide threat. And of course, that needs to be considered. And although it may not be publicly said, I absolutely would say in behind closed doors conversations, that is 100% being considered as well. Now, speaking on that first point about bringing relationships closer and that Europe is closer with a working relationship, at least with Russia, we look at especially future Middle Eastern conflicts, especially say with Iran. Now, I am of the thought process that there will be a hot war with Iran at some point in the future. And of course, Russia has a lot of influence there. And the last thing we want is another Iron Curtain and Russia desperately replacing business in exchange potentially for some warheads. We know that that is what Iran is desperately after, or at least then the centrifuges to do this. Previously, they weren't available to them. And this, of course, completely balances the power in the Middle East. And we have seen a remarkable increase in Iranian systems and Iranian proxies' ability. And yesterday was a great example. We saw a Houthi drone bypass some of the most high-level, high-tech air defense systems in the world, striking Tel Aviv. So we see then this video here. It's not the greatest video in the world, but it's not too bad. We can see then this drone here. Again, I wish we got a better view specifically of this drone coming in on its final then approach and striking a building here. I believe killing one and wounding some others. Again, not the greatest footage of this. Trey Yinks was on the ground. Go watch him. It's on Twitter. Now, Atlas News has put up some good bits about this, and let's talk about this. The Houthis have claimed responsibility for an explosive drone attack against Tel Aviv early Friday morning, which left one person dead and several others wounded. The Houthis stated that a new Jaffa drone type was used, which they claim is capable of bypassing interceptor systems and being unable to be detected by radars. There were no air raid alerts or interceptions before the strike. So point number one here seems pretty then legit. Now, the IAF has claimed the drone was identified but not engaged by air defences due to human error. Now, in this, personally, I may be incorrect, I don't buy that for a second. Things like the alarms and other AD systems are automated. They can have human interference, of course, but a lot of those are automated with an opt-out. So it doesn't intercept if you press something, but it will sound or intercept just for that time of speed. The exact launch point and flight path of the drone remain unknown, as it appears to have approached the city from the Mediterranean Sea. So this is all very interesting, and it does look, if we use what is probably most likely, what's most likely? That the EW, all of the air defense, and there's multi-layers of this, and then all the radars didn't pick up this drone. It's not going to be one human error behind this. What is more likely, that, or that this drone actually did bypass some of those systems now that they've been assessing these systems for a number of months or years. But this, if we're assuming it was launched from Yemen, this has travelled a hell of a long way through the Red Sea. Of course, this is where we don't know what path this may have taken, and whether it may have gone above the Red Sea or through Saudi or through Sudan or Egypt. You never know where. But from the Mediterranean then into Tel Aviv, which is just south of where I've put then my dot here, or potentially it's come from Iran over Iraq and Syria. Again, we're not 100% sure, but this does show the increasing then ability there. And of course, the Houthis and the other guys down south, I don't know if I can say the word on YouTube, are then proxies of Iran. And we know then that relationship was growing, but has been exponentially increased by the tightening sanctions and the war in Ukraine as well. Now, what do I think will happen here? Personally, I believe that the H guys will try and have an attack on an airport and disrupt civilian travel. One incident here would then force a grounding of those aircraft, and it would absolutely isolate Israel and have a huge effect on the civilians there. Yes, you can get ferries out through Cyprus, but of course it's not as easy. And I think that is what they will actually be aiming for with a lot of that. That is my prediction there. So a long way around, I think some of the messaging has definitely changed, and will we see some real peace negotiations or real peace conferences take place? Potentially. And where does the future of relationship with Russia actually sit in a world that, of course, the global south is rising? And does Russia actually feel like then they want that relationship back for trade either? That's another question in it. Has it been switched over to other markets and they don't then care for it? Now, I don't fully believe that. I think the carrot dangled of being able to export oil and gas again in that market still would be absolutely huge, but we never ever know. Now, of course, Donald Trump is the favourite to retake the US presidency, and of course this would have, we presume, a lot of effect on this war. Of course, he has stated multiple times that he will end the war very quickly and limit supply to Ukraine if they don't stop fighting, or if Russia does not stop fighting, then increase support to Ukraine. The things I will say about this is we don't really know how powerful then other forces are on the US government, especially, say, the military-industrial complex, to keep then the war going, because they're making tens of billions of dollars. But let's look at what Trump and Zelensky has said. So Zelensky posted this then on Twitter, spoke to Donald Trump to congratulate him on the Republican nomination and condemn the shocking assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. I wished him strength and absolute safety in the future. I noted the vital bipartisan, bicameral American support for protecting our nation's freedom and independence. Ukraine will always be grateful to the US for its help in strengthening our ability to resist Russian terror. Russian attacks on our cities and villages continue every day. We agreed with President Trump to discuss at a personal meeting what steps can make peace fair and truly lasting. Of course, Trump wants peace. Let's look at what then Trump has said. President Zelensky of Ukraine and I had a very good phone call earlier today. He congratulated me on a very successful Republican National Convention and becoming the Republican nominee for the President of the US. He condemned the heinous assassination attempt. I appreciate Zelensky for reaching out because as your next President of the US, will bring peace to the world and end the war that has cost so many lives and devastated countless innocent families. Both sides will be able to come together and negotiate a deal that ends the violence and paves a path forward for prosperity. So we definitely know that I think Trump and Zelensky have very different ideas of how, when, then this war ends. But I do think with some of the messaging we're seeing out of Kyiv, that we're seeing messaging at least preparing for if Trump were to get in. And I'd be very interested to see what happens in Ukraine if there is a peace deal. And at the end of that, then Russia still occupy some amount of ground in Ukraine. And if it's by the end of the year, then if there is an idea to make the guns fall silent, I can't see any carrot dangled to Russia at this point in time that would make them withdraw from then these territories. I don't believe sanctions are enough. I don't believe diplomatic pressure without China and India and everyone is enough, even if that would be enough. But I guess we're going to find out because time continues to march forwards. Now let's have a look at the map. So of course here is Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now we'll come up in the north, and I've already gone through this. There's no changes up in here, but we know there's a hell of a lot of fighting. This map, of course, still shows that there is a disconnect up here. Now after weeks and weeks there, that is not going to be disconnected. There's no way you could then continue then supplying this. But let's actually just step back to yesterday and then turn on then the checking, which shows, of course, movement in the last 24 hours. And we see that this Russian advance near Nevsky. Now, this is actually then confirmed today by Syriac. That's the reason we bring this up. So same area in here, bang, bang, both maps showing it. Then presume that has then taken place. So let's step then forward to today and have a look at then the map updates. Now we'll come down into Siversk here, the first area we'll talk about, and then this Russian advancement through Rozdilivka. Now a number of maps have shown that Rozdilivka has been occupied now for an amount of time, some up a couple of weeks. Deep State now confirming then this advancement here today. Then we need to look at Vimimka here. Now, this is very interesting because this map shows a fair bit more territory is changing just to then the east of here from Spurny across to then Vimimka. So we'll see. So this is the railway line running through here, fairly similar. But then we see then this reservoir up here. I can't read what town, Ivano-Dorivka in here and Spurny, that what this map is showing is that Russia has filled in this entirety gap between Spurny through something along the lines of this then today, which, if correct, is a lot of land. This would be about 5 kilometres. Now, again, this isn't shown across both maps. It's not showing any changes in here. So again, like always, take with a grain of salt, but it is showing movement around Rozdilivka. Let's look at what then Syriac says. During the last week, Russian army made significant advances southwest of Siversk, leading to the capture of the village of Ivano-Dorivka and a series of trench systems. So he's saying over a week. Interesting to see if and when this updates again. We've talked about the Siversk front. There's very, very little movement on this front over the last year and or more. So let's read what Syriac specifically says about this. After the fall of Spurny by Ukrainian army lost a strong point of its defences around Siversk, where since September 22, they have conducted an incredible defence, stopping all attempts of Russian advance. We even know Russian commanders talking about how good Ukraine's defence was in here. However, during the first months of 24, the problems of rotation and supply have also reached this front, where after the initial Russian advance along the railroad line and the seizure of the fortified positions in the hills east of Rozdilivka, they have managed to open breaches in the Ukrainian lines that have allowed the Russians to reach areas they could not reach in the first year of invasion. Despite these achievements, progress to Siversk will remain relatively slow due to the presence of numerous fortified hills to the south and southwest of the city overlooking the Bakhmutka Valley. So if you look at where Bakhmut is in relation to Siversk, and I'll show you in a second, it's very rolling hills in here. This creates a lot of problems for a offensive force due to defilade guns and then how defensive positions can sit. The cadence of advances will depend on progress on other fronts and the weakening of Ukrainian armed forces around Siversk. Let us remember that the capture of this bastion will allow the Russian army not only to level the front, but also to allow an advance towards the urban agglomeration of Slovyansk, parallel to Siversky Donetsk River, where the Ukrainian troops will begin to have supply problems and the risk of being encircled from their rear. We will have to wait to the end of 24 or the beginning of 25 to see the conclusion of such a battle. So it's still going to be a very slow movement on here. But of course, what Russia want in here is, of course, Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, on the major centres left in then the Donbass. So let's just push down to the south now. No changes shown on this map today of Chasiv Yar, of course. We saw this filling in around Kalinivka yesterday, but then we do have then this map update from then Noel reports here showing a level of this filling in, not to the same degree, but showing that there was some Russian movement on then this front. So let's continue pushing down. Of course, we have then the New York Toretsk front sitting in here. We do know there has been some Russian movement. Now, no movement shown on this map today, but then we have Syriac showing some small advances in multiple locations. So just to the east of Pivdeni, it shows a movement in here. Further movement out on this second finger moving into Pivnevchi, and as well up the top near Druzhba, filling in some locations here as well. Of course, Syriac is showing much more on the northern side in here. If we take where this road corner is, out in these locations. So he's showing basically where the grey zone is red, at least by his map. During the last 24 hours, Russian army took full control over the street of Petra, Vilyanovkovo, and Druzhba, and advanced inside Pevnevchi along the river of Pavlova. In addition, Russian forces took control over the Telecons of this adjacent to Pivdeni. So there has been some minor movements in here. Of course, once you enter urban environments, it's going to slow down a lot. Now, Australian front, where we see movement every day, we are seeing a further Russian advancement then into Prohez, which we have talked about over the last couple of weeks. Now, we see exactly here, this is lining up basically exactly with Syriac, showing that Prohez, that there has been some movement. Exactly what Russia's doing in here. Well, they're moving urban centre to urban centre to close up then the ability to continue defending these large open areas. By getting the towns, you risk the large open areas and the envelopment happening there. And we've seen this from Avdiivka, then through Badachi, through Osheretny, and now we're seeing it through Prohez moving up then gradually. And if you just scroll back through this map and then scroll forward, you can then see that happening systematically. Now let's then have a look at the Noel reports map. Now he's showing this, and obviously Livkia Persha movement here as well. Now here's showing a bit more maybe out to the west, if we see then this road, then the deep state map. But again, showing the reason we're showing this, even if it matches up, is just to double check, double confirm that there is then movement. Now, I do believe that are the only changes we actually then see on the map today. Yes, I'm correct. Legends, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you're looking after yourself. Have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.